We just came back from the December 13th CSU board meeting, and we've summarized the most important points to inform you students about. So let's get into it. What happened at this board meeting? So to start off this meeting, there was a presentation by a student. Any student is allowed to sign up for public input. So if you as a student have any issues that you think our students' union should be supporting, all of us have the right to sign up to speak at these meetings and bring our issues forward. What the student spoke about was the proposed raise in international student tuition fees. In the Board of Governors agenda, there is a proposed 5% increase for international students that's going to be voted on in February. The student brought forward their concerns about the proposed 5% increase to international student tuition fees. The CSU is working on a campaign to kick off during the spring term for advocacy for international student tuition fee increases. Capilano University has informally committed to maintaining international student fee increases at 2% in line with domestic student increases, but it seems like they're stepping out of this commitment. So in the past, the Board of Governors has said that they would be consulting with the CSU on decisions that impact students like this. However, they said that they would be informing the CSU and not consulting with them on this decision. The CSU Board of Directors voted in favor of supporting this advocacy, and it was all unanimous. The next decision that was made was releasing $9,000 from the External Advocacy Fund for a federal lobbying trip. So since the CSU has left the Canadian Alliance of Student Associations, they've reallocated those funds to doing their own advocacy at the federal level. So there were $9,000 released from the advocacy fund for CSU executives as well as support staff to go to Ottawa and advocate for students. So the next item is what was given notice at the last meeting about the special general meeting to repeal academic standing bylaws that was put forward by the board member Navjot Singh. In October, at the annual general meeting, there were several bylaws passed related to election policies and procedures. So when it comes to changing bylaws, these cannot be changed by the Board of Directors. There needs to be members of the organization present at the annual general meeting in order for all present members to be able to vote on these changes that will affect them. The requirement to have a 2.0 GPA in order to run in the CSU elections was passed unanimously at the last annual general meeting. So the at-large representative, Navjot Singh, put forward this motion to call a special general meeting with no recommendations from any committees. It was just him as a board member deciding to put it forward. When speaking to this motion, Navjot said a lot of students came forward to him that a GPA requirement to stand in elections should be removed because they also pay student fees. He said the majority of students have a problem in academic standing and there should be no rule. This is the first time that there is a rule for this in elections, and in his opinion, this shouldn't be a rule at all. There should be fair gameplay for everyone. So if a student falls below a 2.0 GPA, they're put on academic alert. If they fall below a 1.67, they'll be placed on academic probation. Once that student is on academic probation, if they fall below 1.59, then that student would be put on a required to withdraw status. It was already a rule in the election that if you're on academic alert, you're ineligible to be a candidate in the CSU elections. Before this 2.0 minimum was passed at the annual general meeting, the previous minimum was a 1.67 GPA when you'd be put on academic probation. The board member Prince brought up points that the primary objective of us being in this university is to study. If you can't maintain the minimum GPA, you should focus on getting back to your studies before focusing on elections and other extracurriculars. The new Senate Representative Saksham echoed that point, saying that if a student falls below 2.0 and they're struggling with their studies, then they shouldn't take on extracurriculars because it will affect that person's studies, and said that a 2.0 minimum GPA is fine and should not be changed. The president, Angad Brar, said everyone will have different views on this. According to me, even if a person doesn't have minimum requirement, that doesn't mean they'll be a bad leader. Some leaders have GPA below 2. We are no one to decide on behalf of students if they have a GPA below 2. Students are mature enough to decide what's right for them. If they want to, they deserve to have a fair chance. All students are CSU fee-paying members. All students should have the right to run in elections. So a point brought up by Sophia is that if an individual hasn't put time and effort into their own classes, how can we expect them to write reports on time, attend meetings? And it sets the CSU up in an unsuccessful manner to elect people who have track records of not putting in effort. It is our decision, because we are the board, we set those expectations. We can't look at an individual person and say they're not fit to represent, but we can set minimum standards. If that person does well later, year, they can run in the next elections. We should give these students the opportunity and incentive to focus on academics first. A point brought up by Priya McMurtry, the Senate representative, she echoed the point made by Sophia, saying that if students cannot maintain a 2.0 minimum, then they likely cannot maintain the standards that the CSU holds. Another point brought up by Sophia was that if you're required to repeat classes because you don't meet the minimum standards, then that's even more expensive and costs even more than the CSU fees, and this would cause further financial burdens for students who are experiencing financial challenges. So when speaking to this, the board member Sanchit said that earlier when he was thinking about this motion, he thought he would be voting against it, but he changed his mind because of what he experienced during exam period. He thinks that this should pass because we need to hear these voices as well, and we can't judge students on the basis of a GPA, because GPA is a constant goal to maintain and has nothing to do with the students' union. If a student fails one course by chance, maybe they had a bad day, and that will take their GPA down. The at-large representative Yuvraj said that being good at academics doesn't mean you won't be a good leader. Some people are great at academics, but not a great leader. Nothing says a high-grading student will be a good leader. It's about the mindset a person has, and everyone should have a fair right to run for elections. The board member Prince clarified that he's not doubting anyone's ability to be a good leader, but pointing out the fact that a 2.0 GPA is the bare minimum, and below that you will be asked to withdraw. If you withdraw, you'll lose your ability to be on the board. A guest at the meeting said a 2.0 GPA is the bare minimum, and he is below the bare minimum. That doesn't mean he's not very well at his studies. Students are still pushing themselves, and maybe next semester they'll be passed. Nobody is pushing anyone to take part in any of these things, meaning the elections. It's up to them to participate in extracurricular activities or not, and it is completely unfair to deprive them of their rights. The board member Just Curet agreed with this guest, saying that he went to India because of family problems and his GPA went down, so you can't judge students by their GPA. So the board member Priya McMurtry motioned for a confidential session without staff and without guests. This was seconded by Prince. However, this did not receive enough votes and was defeated, so continued in a public session. The president, Angad, said that this is about democracy, and taking out the GPA will make it not equal, and there shouldn't be a requirement for academic standings in elections. The board member Sophia Kara said they're not saying students need to have a 3.0 or 4.0, but they're just setting the minimum standards, because there's a level of time commitment that comes with being a CSU board member. Every single person who's on this board recognizes that it's more than showing up to a meeting twice a month. It's making sure that your schedule correlates. She said this is not depriving them of their rights, it's just making sure they're taking care of themselves before the university and the students' union. Sophia referred to the annual general meeting, where constituents went to it and the voters voted yes in favor of having this 2.0 minimum standard. This bylaw change already went before the constituents, meaning the CSU members, us as students, at the annual general meeting, and was voted on and passed unanimously. So an individual board member made a motion to call this special general meeting because it affects their friends. She said we need to repeal this because our own constituents have already voted on this. So in response to this, the board member Ekam said this motion passed in the annual general meeting, but students reached out to us and don't want this motion anymore. When this came to a vote, the only people that were opposed to calling a special general meeting were Priya, Sophia, Prince, and Saksham. So these are our Senate and Board of Governors representatives. So this motion did pass with 4 against and 13 in favor. On Tuesday, January 28th at 11:30 a.m. on the North Vancouver campus, there will be a special general meeting to repeal the academic standing bylaws that were already voted on and passed unanimously at the CSU's annual general meeting in October. Quorum for this meeting is 75, and if quorum is lost, the meeting will end. And there needs to be 2/3 of vote in favor of repealing the academic requirements for running in elections. There's a verbal update given by the student senator, Priya McMurtry, saying that there's been a lot of progress made in Senate regarding getting student voting rights back onto faculty councils. She's been working along with Deb Jameson, as well as the CSU's Advocacy and Campaigns Director, Josh, and has been making a spreadsheet based on student involvement in senates at other universities, and she'll be presenting it in January in front of all of the deans. That's all of the important updates and changes that were made at the CSU Board of Directors meeting on December 13th. This was the last Board of Directors meeting for the year, so they'll be restarting again in January 2025. Make sure you stay tuned for the next term because the CSU elections will be happening in March and they have a new elections administrator as well as different bylaw changes that were passed in regards to the elections. The Courier will be providing coverage on all things related to the CSU elections, so make sure you stay tuned for these important updates.